There is a 5-hour window every single day. During those 5 hours, the Archons go completely blind. They cannot find you. They cannot reach you. You are, for those hours, genuinely free. Now, you've spent your whole life hearing that spiritual protection meant church on Sunday, prayer before bed, a Bible on the nightstand. Your pastor told you that. Your parents believed it. Every institution said the same thing over and over until it felt like law. But here's what I need to tell you. Jesus, the real Jesus, not the version that Rome packaged for political purposes in 325 AD, the actual teacher, the one his inner circle called the Living One. He taught something completely different to the people closest to him, something specific, something practical, something with a time attached to it. A precise window every single morning when the forces that feed on human consciousness go dark, go quiet, cannot operate. Not poetry, not metaphor. A real window with real hours. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to understand why this was buried for 17 centuries, and why the institution that buried it had every reason in the world to make sure you never found it. But first, let me show you something that changes the picture entirely. I spent years working through suppressed Gnostic texts before I understood what I was actually looking at. And it was that slow realization, that dawning sense that something essential had been deliberately hidden, that became the foundation of awakened minds. The feeling that we'd been handed a map with the most important part torn out. Let me tell you where this story begins, where it really begins. 325 AD, a city called Nicaea, in what is now Turkey, a council of bishops called together by the Roman Emperor Constantine. Now, you were probably taught that the Council of Nicaea was about clarifying Christian doctrine, a sincere theological gathering. The best ideas rose to the top. That's the story, and it has been repeated by priests, by scholars, by historians so many times for so many centuries that it feels like simple fact. But here's what doesn't add up. Before Nicaea, there were dozens of Christian Gospels circulating across the ancient world, not just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, dozens. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Pistis Sophia, texts that described a completely different understanding of Jesus, of spiritual life, of what human beings actually are. After Nicaea, those texts were declared heretical. Owning them meant death. Bishops who disagreed were exiled, some were executed, and the texts themselves hidden, burned, erased. In 1945, and I want you to sit with this date because it matters, a farmer in Egypt, near a town called Nag Hammadi, was digging near a cliff face and struck a sealed clay jar. Inside that jar were 13 leather-bound codices, 17 centuries old, hidden by monks who knew what was coming and understood those texts had to survive somehow, authenticated later by scholars at Oxford, at Harvard, at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. The question isn't whether these texts are real. They're real. The scholars confirmed it decades ago. The question is, what did they contain that was so dangerous Rome spent a century trying to destroy them? A map. Not a geographical map, a map of time, a map of consciousness, a map showing, in precise detail, when human beings are most vulnerable to the forces the Gnostics called Archons, and when they are not. If that map exists, and it does, then you don't need an institution, you don't need a mediator, you don't need someone standing between you and the divine. And institutions that aren't needed disappear. So, if everything you were taught about Christian spiritual life was built on a deliberate selection chosen by a Roman emperor for political reasons, what exactly was left out? That's the question that changes everything. Here's what you need to know. The earliest Gnostic Christians, the ones who actually sat with Jesus, they encoded something into their most protected texts. The Egyptians had touched it centuries earlier. They called it the hour of the hidden sun. The Essenes, the desert community near the Dead Sea, the same community that shaped the early formation of Jesus himself, they called it the Watch of Silence. And today, modern chronobiologists have mapped the exact same phenomenon without knowing what they were confirming. They call it the trough of human cortical arousal. I call it the Archonic Blind Window. Between approximately 3 o'clock in the morning and 8 a.m., with the core window running from 4 to 7 a.m., human consciousness shifts into a frequency state that archonic interference cannot effectively penetrate. Let me give you a plain way to understand that. Think about a radio signal blocked by terrain, a mountain range, thick concrete. The signal doesn't disappear, it just cannot get through the certain interference. The mountain doesn't know it's blocking the signal, it simply does. The human brain in the hours just after deep sleep operates differently than at any other time of day. The part of the mind that generates ego noise, social anxiety, fear, rumination, it goes quiet, genuinely quiet. In a way it never does during waking hours. That's not an accident of biology, that's the window. And the Gnostic teachers, the ones who preserved the actual instructions, didn't just identify this window. They built an entire spiritual practice around it. 3 specific disciplines, performed during those specific hours, designed to permanently change your relationship to the forces that shape your experience every other hour of every other day. I'm not going to just tell you this. I'm going to show you the evidence, historical evidence, going back 3,000 years, scientific evidence from peer-reviewed research you've never seen on the news, and evidence from a source that will genuinely surprise you. Starting with the oldest proof. Go back to ancient Egypt 3,000 years ago. The priests of the Temple of Karnak did not sleep the way ordinary people slept. They divided the night into 12 segments, 12 spiritual hours, each with a different quality of divine access. The final 3 hours before sunrise, they called them the hours of the opened eye of Ra, temple ritual, oracle consultation, initiation ceremonies, all deliberately timed to this pre-dawn window. Now, move forward 1,000 years. The Essenes of Qumran, the community whose scrolls were found near the Dead Sea in 1947, had a practice called the Morning Vigil. Members rose before sunrise and spent the first hours in contemplative practice, not institutional prayer, something older, something the Dead Sea Scrolls scholar John Allegro described as direct communion, unmediated by priestly hierarchy. Direct, unmediated, no institution required, and the Gnostic Christians themselves. The Pistis Sophia, one of those Nag Hammadi texts, dated to the 2nd century, contains a passage where Jesus explicitly instructs his disciples to practice spiritual turning during the hours when the light begins to divide from the dark. 3 civilizations, 3,000 years of history, the same window. That's not coincidence. That's a map that survived because people who used it knew it worked. Now, I know some of you are thinking ancient texts are interesting, but what does modern science say? In 2019, researchers at the University of California, Berkeley published findings from a detailed study of human brainwave activity during the sleep-wake transition. In the period between approximately 4:30 and 7 a.m., during natural waking without an alarm, the brain produces an unusual combination of theta and gamma wave activity. This state is associated with what neuroscientists call hypnagogic lucidity, heightened perceptual openness, dramatically reduced activity in the fear-processing regions of the brain. In plain language, the mind is open and the fear system is temporarily quiet. The HeartMath Institute, a research organization in California studying heart-brain function for over 30 years, has independently confirmed that heart-brain coherence peaks consistently in pre-dawn hours, between 4 o'clock and 6:30 a.m. in people who wake naturally. They called it receptive coherence. That is the scientific language for what the Gnostic teachers called the open window. Same observation, 17 centuries apart. Different vocabulary. When I first brought this research together for Awakened Minds, I honestly didn't expect the response. Over 300 people wrote in, describing the same experience. Once they started working with this window, I'll tell you about one of them right now. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Richard, retired electrical engineer, Midwest, 71 years old. He told me up front, I'm a skeptic. I don't go in for spiritual talk. He had what he described as background noise, low-level anxiety. Not debilitating, just always present. He'd had it so long he'd stopped noticing it, assumed it was just how he was built. A family member shared this research with him. He was skeptical, but he was also retired. And he figured, what was the cost of trying? He started waking at 5 a.m., no phone, no news, no television, 20 minutes of silence, then 15 minutes reading from the Gospel of Thomas. 6 weeks later, he wrote, the noise stopped. Not just in the mornings, it stopped permanently, like something that had always been pulling at me just let go. He didn't start a new religion, he didn't join anything, he didn't spend any money, he just found the window and used it. 300 people, same shift, same language, something let go, across different backgrounds, different beliefs, different parts of the country. Patterns like that mean something. But here is what makes this truly impossible to dismiss. You know who else identified this window? The United States intelligence community. CIA Project Stargate, declassified in 1995, available right now on the CIA's own public reading room. You can look it up yourself. The program spent $25 million studying what they called remote viewing, and the optimal window for performance documented repeatedly, pre-dawn hours between 4 and 7 a.m. The program's lead researcher, Dr. Edwin May, noted in declassified documents that subjects showed consistently higher accuracy during this window than at any other time. The US intelligence community spent a quarter century and $25 million confirming what Egyptian priests knew 3,000 years ago. And they didn't share that with you either. Stop for a moment. Egyptian temple priests 3,000 years ago identified this window. The Essenes built their entire discipline around it. Gnostic Christians received it as direct teaching. UC Berkeley mapped the same brain state. The HeartMath Institute confirmed the coherence peak. The CIA operationalized the same window for intelligence purposes, everything pointing in one direction. So why isn't this taught? Why didn't your pastor mention it? The answer isn't comfortable, but you deserve to hear it. Follow the logic here. The institutional church, across Catholic, Protestant and evangelical structures represents approximately $1.2 trillion in annual economic activity in the United States alone. Buildings, publishing, media, schools, counseling services, that entire infrastructure depends on one thing: your spiritual dependency. If you can access genuine spiritual experience directly every single morning for free, you don't need the institution. You don't need the Sunday service. You don't need someone standing between you and the sacred, telling you what it's saying. That's not a conspiracy theory. That is simply what happens when you follow the money. And how did they guarantee you wouldn't find out? First, they removed the texts. The Nag Hammadi library was hidden around 350 AD, right as Rome was declaring Gnostic Christianity a capital offense. The monks who buried those codices in that clay jar knew exactly what they were doing. They were hiding the map. Second, they replaced the map with dependency. Instead of teaching people to access spiritual experience directly, they built an institution that positioned itself as the only legitimate pathway. Third, they made it dangerous to question. The word heretic comes from the Greek word for choice. Heresy, literally, means choosing for yourself. And that, to Rome, was the ultimate threat. This system has operated for 1700 years. It is extraordinarily effective. I know this is hard to sit with. There's grief in it, the realization of what was withheld. But here's what I want you to hold on to. This is not a story about what was taken. This is a story about what was preserved. Hidden in a clay jar in the Egyptian desert for 16 centuries, found by a farmer in 1945, available today for anyone willing to look. The window is still there every morning, exactly as it always was. And now I'm going to show you how to use it. Here are 3 specific practices drawn from Gnostic Christian tradition, cross-referenced with what modern neuroscience confirms that you can begin tomorrow morning. You don't need to join anything. You don't need to spend $1. You only need to wake up before the world does. The first practice, the threshold sit. Set your alarm for 5 a.m. or 5:30 if that feels like too much to start. When you wake, do not touch your phone, do not turn on the television, do not let the news in. Sit upright. In a chair is perfectly fine. Feet flat on the floor. Stay in silence for 20 minutes. That's the practice. Why does it work? Most people wake up and immediately import everything that's wrong with the world into the one part of the day when their nervous system is genuinely open. You're stopping that. You're letting the window be a window. The Pistis Sophia describes this as becoming still before the light is spoken. Neuroscience describes it as preserving the hypnagogic theta state before cortical arousal locks in. Same instruction, same result. Start here, tomorrow morning. The second practice, the Thomas reading. The Gospel of Thomas contains 114 individual sayings attributed to Jesus. Each one is brief. After 10 minutes of silence in your threshold, sit open to one saying. Just one. Read it once. Sit with it. Don't analyze. Don't immediately reach for interpretation. These sayings were specifically designed to be received during the open window state. They function differently in the quiet brain. Most of us want immediate intellectual resolution. This practice asks for something different. Let the saying land in the silence and notice what happens in you. After 2 to 3 weeks, most people begin to experience what they describe as recognition, not understanding. Recognition, like remembering something you forgot you knew. That difference matters enormously. The third practice, the intention seal. This one is advanced. Build the first two for at least 3 weeks before adding this. At the end of your morning window, around 6:30 to 7 a.m., state one single intention for the day. Not a task, not a goal, an intention about who you are choosing to be. Today, I will not be moved by fear. Today, I will remain present. Today, I will see clearly. The Gnostic teachers called this sealing the day before the Archon's wake. Modern psychology has found that implementation intentions set before media exposure in early morning hours show dramatically higher follow-through than those set at any other point in the day. Same result, same window, 2 warnings. The first mistake, starting for 3 days, feeling nothing dramatic, and stopping. This is not a weekend experiment. The effect accumulates over weeks. The people who report the most significant changes are uniformly those who gave it at least 30 days. The second mistake, letting the phone in. Even once. The morning window is contaminated the moment you introduce external anxiety into it. Treat those first hours like the most valuable time in your day, because that's exactly what they are. Let's bring this together. You came into this video having been told, for your entire life, that spiritual protection came through membership, attendance, and loyalty to a curated set of texts chosen by a Roman emperor. What you found here was something else. Egyptian priests, Essene monks, and Gnostic Christians who actually knew Jesus all mapped the same window independently across centuries. UC Berkeley, the HeartMath Institute, and the CIA, none of them talking to each other, confirmed the same window from completely different directions. One retired engineer's experience matched the ancient description precisely, and you understand now why the institution needed this buried. In 20 minutes you learned what 17 centuries of institutional effort tried to erase. You are not the same person who pressed play. You're now part of a smaller group, people who don't just believe in spiritual life, but who have been given the actual coordinates. What you do with them is your choice. There's considerably more beneath this surface. The full Gnostic cosmology of the Archons, their structure, their mechanisms, how they operate across the other 19 hours of the day, is a much deeper conversation. We're going to go there in the next video. If this reached something in you, leave the word window in the comments below. It lets me know this material is resonating, and it signals to the algorithm that this conversation deserves a wider audience. And if someone in your life is still standing at the door, the institution built, waiting for permission to enter something that was always theirs, share this with them. The window opens every morning. Most people sleep right through it. We'll see you in the next one.